Of a video that went round, a video showing 4 police officers brutally beating up a young man. This was after riots broke out at JKUAT of what the students term as insecurity in the area. They complained about instances of attacks against them at night, during the day, and losing property. And because of that, there was a strike, and police came in to quell the students. And a telephone, one of the students was able to record Alan Omondi being thoroughly beaten up by police officers. This video has since gone viral, and a lot of reactions have come up after that. The 4 police officers, 3 of them have been identified and have been indicted, and investigations are ongoing over what happened. And it brings me all to the issue of police brutality, Linus. This is not the first instance where we've seen police officers go and brutally beat up a potential suspect or a rioter.
No, it's a very, very bad picture. The police service is worse off with those kind of images. But this also illustrates a situation where we have a police service that has never transitioned to the new constitutional dispensation. We have a police service that is not aware of its mandate as illustrated in the Constitution. We have a police service that doesn't understand the place of human rights and basic freedoms, like the right to actually peaceably assemble, the right to picketing. We've seen them do bad things. Forget about the beating. We've seen them dispersing people for gathering at Uhuru Park to begin a march to Parliament, for example, for no good reason. But more importantly, this is a police service that has blood on its hands. This is the police service on whose hands Baby Pendo died, just because of the excesses of some of them. And they get excited, especially around students and around political events. It was very, very sad watching the police service approach to elections last election in 2017. You'd think they're an armed wing of a political party. Very excited to go, especially into Kibera, chase people, beat people, some of them who are just walking back to work or back from work. And it's such a very sad state of affairs. The images from JKUAT, yet another stain on the fabric, new blue fabric of police uniforms.
Actually, maybe some would say that the students, yes, they were rioting, but they were even attacking motorists, that it turned... it became almost, there was a lot, the traffic came to a standstill. There were those who complained that they'd been attacked by the students, but did it warrant the police to use such force?
There's no justification whatsoever for such excessive use of force. I mean, look at those images, and Alan Omondi is somebody's son, brother, cousin, relative. You can imagine not just the pain on his part, but the pain of his family members. You can imagine how brutal it is to see your kin being beaten up in such a manner. It's terrible. But I think with the advent of social media, which is a great thing, some of these things can be easily picked out and brought to the national limelight. Well, there was also some disappointment on my part when we were told by the Inspector General of Police that the 4 police officers have been interdicted. But we were not told who they were, their force numbers, and it took some more pressure for the National Police Service Commission to say, these are the guys, 3 of them. I still don't understand how and why the 4th one has not been named. It becomes easy so that those officers are not silently sneaked into another police station to go and continue with that brutality. That said, it is disappointing that such things could happen in this day and age. Probably this is a late discussion, because what happened in 2017 and in 2013, as Lina says, we saw the same police brutality on ODM supporters or NASA supporters, and very little was said. Actually, at that time, there was some sort of justification that these are goons, so they deserve what was happening to them. Yet that was unwarranted, totally. There's a measure of force that can be used even to quell the roughest of riots, so to say. Even as we say this, it's also important to tell our students that we are here to defend their rights as citizens, as fellow citizens. So even as they embark on such riots, they should also be very careful not to inconvenience the neighborhood and other people who are using, let's say, the roads and so on and so forth, because probably they also have rights just like they have. But to witness what we saw on that video is totally unacceptable.
And Joe, the students were rioting because of their security, and it's not 1, 2, or 3, or 4 instances where they've been attacked and robbed, and they felt like this was the only way they were going to get any attention, and they did. Even had meetings of the university leadership. We even have Member of Parliament Moses Kuria coming and meeting them. They even went all the way to Vigilance House and met Charles Owino, and promises were made about how security was going to be improved in that area. So they did make their point, Joe, that the issues that they were complaining about is going to be addressed. But is this the only way they could have gone ahead to do it? Because
well, I think, Jamila, it has to be said that it is unacceptable when anybody, for that matter, starts stoning motorists and that sort of thing. But I think that being the case, and considering that it probably would have been a few students doing that, cannot take away from the fact that these students had a genuine grievance. And that is where I'm going to go just a little bit of a layer deeper in this, because I think that the fact that this happened not only opened our eyes to just how brutal our police service can still be, but it also, and I think for me very critically at this point, it pointed to the very despicable conditions in which our students who are in the highest institutions of learning in this country actually have the conditions they have to put up with even as they pursue an education. It really just speaks to how much value, if any, we place on education. And it is actually a systematic thing that we have seen, where the general culture of mediocrity means that now we no longer attach any value to even things that are very important. Because these are the people who are going to be doctors tomorrow. These are the people who are going to run all these state institutions and everything. So what are we doing? We are letting these people not only deal with, grapple with these very serious issues of insecurity, but we are talking about places they can't even get accommodation in decent places. The universities cannot contain the number of students there, but there's no care or there's no effort that you see in making sure that these students live in environments that will make them focus just on learning. When you start focusing on what the landlord is going to say tomorrow, you start focusing on, oh yeah, you know, the caretaker of this thing, or because the water was not working, all manner of things that students typically never worried about. I mean, the hostels in the universities always had all these caretakers. People would make sure that the toilets and all these things are working. And if they were not working, it wasn't the job of any one student to run around looking for the janitor and whatever those people were. So we have a situation where the best brains in this country, because that is what we must assume, that the people who go to the universities are actually very good brains in this country, and they're supposed to be joining some of the really high stakes professions in this country. But we are subjecting them to this kind of thing. What kind of results are we going to get? I will get someone out there to come and do my paper because I didn't have time to do it. I was wondering whether the water was going to come at night so that I could get some buckets, and you know, that is really the tragedy we have. And I think for me, it is an indictment of us as a country if we cannot place our money where the value is. The Bible that I read talks about where your treasure is, where your heart is, there your treasure will be. What you value, you will put your heart and your effort there. We are failing those students.
When you speak about money, Yvonne, and failing the students, you mentioned money, Joe, and I was speaking to a student in one of the universities, and they're telling me they pay about between 6,500 to 8,000 shillings for a bed sitter. And in fact, if you want better accommodation, somewhere that is more secure, you pay up to 11,000 shillings for a bed sitter, so that you, at least you are assured that hapa nikiingia, nitapata maji, nitapata stima, and it'll be a bit more secure. But Yvonne, as Joe says, that should not be the situation.
It shouldn't. And, you know, let me say this. You know, this university is my alma mater. So this was very painful to watch. And I know a little bit about, you know, the situation in Juja campus, particularly. So first of all, getting a room is very hard. I don't know if you remember, even Hassan Mugambi did his story the other day and talked about 35,000 is the student population, and only 10,000 of them get accommodation within the hostels in campus. So that's 25,000 seeking housing outside. Now, students are typically, fodder for gangsters, for robbers, because they're believed to have money, money from help, and, they're students, laptops and phones, so they are a high target. If you take a look at the area, I mean, like you said, 11,000, please note they're paying 11,000 or anywhere between 6,000 and 11,000 per month.
Yes.
Now, you know how much you pay? I can't remember, how much was it that we paid during the semester? We paid
about
a fraction of that. It was about 5,000 when I was there, for an entire semester, which is 3 to 4 months. So you can see the sort of expenses that these young people have to go through, and those are their parents who are actually having to fund that. And remember, these are students who come from all sorts of places. I mean, we had students from Homa Bay, we had students from Taita Taveta, and here they are coming in and having to find a place to live in a place that they absolutely do not know. It is surrounded by other places like Gashororo, which was a Panya route that we used to use to get to school. The security there is not guaranteed. But yet, what is happening at JKUAT is not something unique. I want to quote a thesis that was done by a lady known as Jemima Wanjiko Ndungu. This was a thesis she submitted on the status of private accommodation for undergraduate students in Kenya, a case of Kenyatta University. This was in 2015. And in the literature review, she talks about the hostel capacity being 10,086 and the total undergraduate population being 50,425. Where are these other 40,000 students going to? Universities are admitting more and more students, more than the capacity, and it also points to the quality of education because beyond the hostels, think about, I mean, these are overstretched. All the resources there, the labs and everything that they're supposed to use. Now, let me also take you to what happened in South Africa. Many people know about the fees must fall.
Yes.
And I remember when we made a trip to South Africa and visited SABC in their research department, one of the ladies actually said she'd been going to the universities for days and noticed that the students were sleeping on the floor. They were actually having to get extra jobs just to meet their demands. And they were able to predict the fees must fall that was about to happen. Now, are we thinking about what's about to happen with the state of our universities, the state of security, the amount of money that they have to pay? This was the issue at hand, and Alan Omondi's case is sad and it should be dealt with. And, we can talk about all the violence, but let's not forget this is the major issue that they were protesting about, and it needs to be addressed.
Naturally, there's a tweet here by Peter Aminga. He says, police brutality could be linked to the frustrations our men and women in the force go through while in service. Remember the trending clip of the Kakamega policewoman who was crying out of frustration from her bosses?
Well, all manner of things can be said to justify failure. I mean, every person in this country, even the president, sometimes I see him frustrated in one way or another. Very many people are frustrated. I mean, if you ask the bulk of Kenyans whether they are actually living the kind of a life they would want to live, they will tell you no. But they don't go violating other people's rights because they are they're not getting exactly what they need. You see, you can get all manner of excuses to justify whatever manner of misbehavior that has happened. It is one thing to say, yes, we have very many good police officers. We have over 100,000 police officers in this country. Not all of them are rogue. We have a number that are, and they spoil the name of the police officers. So these are the ones who should be dealt with. Yes, they also deserve habitable accommodation, habitable housing, better facilities, equipment, and everything else. They do. They truly do. However, even as they cry about their situation, it is not a justification for violating other people's rights. In fact, I've seen another tweet here. Somebody asked, all those police officers who are there to quell the riots, why was it not possible for Kiambu Police Commander to avail a similar number of police officers to take care of the security needs of Jomo Kenyatta University students, to avert the stabbing of the student who died and avert the riot that occurred thereafter?
And for me, Jamila, even if that were the case, that these people are so frustrated that now they go back and start beating people up, whose responsibility is that?
That's what I was going to say.
If the police service can keep officers first of all, can frustrate officers and go ahead and keep the frustrated officers and allow them to go out there and beat
Carrying
people
weapons,
out. That buck still stops in the very same place, which is Vigilance House. I think the problem is that whatever social problems might exist, whatever psychological problems, there ought to be a system of dealing with those ones, of picking out officers who are losing it, so to speak, and then dealing with it. But to explain away this using frustration and all of those things, I think it's to miss the point. The issue is that brutality against unarmed citizens, because even, I mean, as Yvonne was explaining in the explainer, really, there is something called reasonable force. But that guy, you could see, he was already down. I mean, like, what was he doing? Was he carrying some gun or a knife or anything?
And there were 4 of them.
And there were 4 of them. Just one guy, because those guys look huge, eh?
Yeah.
Just one guy would have already taken Adlan down without even having to use any of those things.
Linus, as we wind up.
Yeah, and something else that has not been happening, Jamila, is responsibility is not taken by the right people. You've seen a lot of work has gone and very quickly into identification of these 4 rogue police officers. There is one that is yet to be identified.
But a question, how do you interdict 4 and only identify 3?
Yes, that doesn't make any sense.
And how can you identify 3 and then the 4th one remains mysterious?
So he stands interdicted wherever he is. but
by osmosis.
Yeah, this is the issue for me. We've never seen the police command taking responsibility for things that go wrong. They're always busy explaining away, and some of them actually talk about these frustrations. Charles Owino, the police spokesman on Daybreak yesterday, was talking about some of these policemen being so young and easy to provoke and things like that. That should not be the case. We need to start seeing the commander of an operation taking responsibility for what has happened, taking responsibility for the wrongs that have happened there. And I think the Baby Pendo case, as decided by the magistrate in the inquest, is a learning curve for the police service, because the finding, found the chain culpable.
Okay, thank you, Linus. Yvonne, final point before we go and finish?
Yes, and it's just, from the explainer that I did within the service standing orders, they are supposed to report to their senior in charge, and it goes all the way to IPOA in the case of, force being used at the scene. So the question is, all these senior officers who were informed, first, were they informed? Okay. 2, when they were informed, what did they do about it? And so I think the big question that IPOA will be seeking to answer is, how far up does responsibility go? I just wanted to underscore that point, because these officers are sent out, they have a brief, they come back, they debrief, they report to their seniors. That level of responsibility needs to go all the way up. And hopefully, this 4th person is identified. Could it be that he is senior and therefore, his ranking could be an embarrassment to the fact that he was involved in such a terrible act?
Luckily, the video is permanent record.
Yes.
So
yes, in fact,
we will know who he is.
Which one?
Pretty soon.
Which of the 4 has not been identified? And the 4th person is still in the video.
In the video, and you say that we should worry about Chinyamaji, them being taken to a different police station, because I think also we should see their faces at some point, and they need to be identified completely to join in anyhow. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are done with this part of the show, and now we are taking